And finally, we'll wrap up today with a bit of a story time with Steve. I know people love real world examples, so I'll give you something I ran into recently, and hopefully you'll be able to get something from it. A family had reached out to me a few months back, hoping I could find a buyer for a property of theirs that's been in the family for decades and decades. Unfortunately, the last person to live there was a bit of a hoarder, just boxes upon boxes, personal belongings everywhere. Couldn't really navigate from room to room. And sure enough, when you walk in the front door, you just get smacked in the face with just these horrible smells. It was going to be a tricky sell, and I think the family knew that too. So I said, all right, let me reach out to my investor network. Ideally, this is going to be perfect for someone that's looking to come in, renovate the property, quite extensively. So let me reach out to my investor network. So at the local Real Estate Investors Association meetup, I got up and said, hey, this is the property I've available, such and such number of bedrooms in this location. If you're interested, come find me after the meetup. And sure enough, people were interested. So I had a couple conversations. One gentleman I spoke with actually works as a wholesaler, and this is something we can discuss. I don't think we've touched on what wholesalers do on this podcast before, but a wholesaler essentially finds people interested in selling their properties and pairs them with people looking to buy them, and essentially takes a cut. So a wholesaler might negotiate with a someone interested in selling their home, say, hey, I'd be willing to pay you, $50,000 for this house. They get it under contract, and then they go out to folks they know who are interested in buying properties, and they say, hey, I have this property under contract. I can sell it to you for $75,000. They say, great. The seller gets out of the property that they no longer want. The buyer gets a property that they can do with it whatever they want, and the wholesaler gets the spread in the middle, right? So that's how wholesalers work. So I connected one of the gentlemen that came up to me after the meeting was a wholesaler. He said, I have someone that would be perfect for this property. I said, wonderful, great. I'd be happy to compensate you if this gentleman ends up buying the property. He said, wonderful, great. So sure enough, this guy comes towards the property. We went back and forth for a couple days on pricing, and he ended up buying the property. And part of his negotiation was, hey, I'm gonna buy it for this amount, and whatever you're paying wholesaler Joe, we'll call him, I'm going to take care of Joe. So you don't need to worry about compensating Joe. I got it. I said, well, that's very attractive for me. The family was happy with the price. I'm happy because I don't have to go pay wholesaler Joe anything, right? So it seems like a win-win. So sure enough, he buys the property. Everyone's happy. Everyone had a great time. A couple weeks later, I get a phone call from wholesaler Joe. He said, hey, Steve, just reaching out to see when you'd be sending those funds over my way. I said, well, Joe, I think you got compensated by, buyer Mike, we'll call him, right? He said, yeah, buyer Mike did, give me some money for the transaction. I have a pre-existing relationship with Mike, and he pays me every lead I bring him. He pays me. So yeah, I did get paid by Mike, but you had told me once the deal closes, you would be paying me. I would expect you to live up to that. Yikes. So we have a bit of a problem on our hands because wholesaler Joe now thinks he's getting basically, paid by the buyer, paid by me, which, to be fair, I told him I would be paying him. And I didn't really know what to do. So if my first thought was, well, he's trying to, collect from me. He's already gotten paid. My first thought was, well, let's go tell this guy to fly a kite, right? He's already gotten paid. He doesn't need to be paid by me too. But I let it sink in a little bit, kind of let it thought. I said, let me reach out to the buyer, because the buyer in this case was someone that has a lot more experience in real estate than I do. They're an older gentleman. They've been doing it for a while. Let me get their opinion on this. So I reached out to him and I explained to him the situation. And he was pretty quick with his response. He said, in all the years I've been in real estate, I've never run into a situation where, $500 was worth terminating a relationship, right? Because if you're going to be in any type of field, whether it's real estate or whatever field you work in, you're going to be in it for a long time, and relationships are going to mean an awful lot. So if the wholesaler is looking to get paid $1,000, $500, whatever it is, you're probably better off just paying him and learn from the experience. So I thought about that, and it made a lot of sense, right? This is whether or not I end up doing business with this person again, whether it's the buyer or the wholesaler. I think you want to bend over backwards to make sure people you do business with leave the transaction with a positive taste in their mouth. And this would have been a great example of something that, we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars, right? I could have made the situation right. So, I called up the wholesaler and I said, yep, they're a there are ways I could have handled this a lot better. And, so I promised you money. I'm going to get you money. So sure enough, I cut him a check. Where are the avenues where this went wrong, though? Because there are a lot of room for improvement. And obviously, I wasn't happy having to cut a check, right? I want all the money for myself. But how do we learn? How do we learn from this? Well, first and foremost, what I didn't do was get everything in writing. And that would have solved everything if I had just gotten everything in writing up front. So who's going to be compensated what? Because, again, this isn't a standard real estate transaction. This is more of, hey, the family needs to find a buyer for this, not a junky property, but a property that had been run down. And here's an investor that wants to buy it. So it's not a traditional listing, yada, yada. So it's a little bit more loosey-goosey than you would typically see in a real estate sale. But that doesn't excuse the fact that it would have been a lot cleaner if I had just gotten everything in writing. So I think that certainly applies to any transactions you're doing in real estate. But again, whatever field you're in, if you're doing business with people, the more you can get in writing, the better. So I think going forward, that's certainly room for improvement there. But also, at the same time, you want to make sure that you're not getting taken advantage of. So get everything in writing for sure. But if you happen to be in a real estate transaction where you're working with a wholesaler that's trying to double end the deal, which is what he tried to do, sure, you can compensate him one time, but in the future, maybe you don't reach out to that wholesaler. Maybe you keep the cell phone and the email address for the buyer and just reach out to that buyer directly in the future. Just a thought. That's it for today. Hope you got something out of this. My email address is steven@sjlincoln.com. sjlincoln.com/book-a-call is the website address if you want to schedule something with me. Again, if you want to do a little bit more research on what it's like to own rental properties, check out the show notes. Again, it's about a 30-minute explainer on analyzing properties, looking at different areas, grant programs if you happen to be someone that's a first-time home buyer. So I think that would be a good start for you. Again, it's pretty practical. It's kind of like a step-by-step on how you do it. Again, Steven@sjlincoln.com, sjlincoln.com/book-a-call. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.